The cot had no number on it. That was the first thing I noticed. I was doing my evening round of Ward 7, the overflow tent they'd strung between the main processing block and the fuel depot on Orth's shelf, canvas walls that sweated condensation and smelled of antiseptic and too many bodies. I had 43 patients logged. The cot in the far corner wasn't in my log, and sitting up in it, watching me with eyes the color of old honey, was a child. She was small, gray-skinned, the soft ash-gray of river slate, with the pointed ears that species from the Varath cluster all shared, and a mouth pressed into a line that was trying very hard not to be afraid. She had a torn piece of thermal wrap around her shoulders and nothing else. No band on her wrist. No species tag. No intake number stamped in the corner of the blanket the way the camp administration required. I crossed the ward, checked her over, lungs clear, no fever, a little thin, a little tired, and asked the night attendant Sebek who'd admitted her. He shrugged. No one, she was there when I came on shift. I figured she'd been logged. I went to the terminal, searched by cot number. The system returned nothing. Searched by the physical description. Nothing. Searched unregistered intakes for the last 72 hours. Nothing. 3 days. She'd been in that cot for 3 days, and to the camp she didn't exist. I pulled a chair up to her cot and sat at her level. "I'm the doctor," I said, and the translation chip in my jaw rendered it in standard, then in Varath cluster pidgin. "What's your name?" She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, in a voice so careful it hurt to hear, "I don't think I have one, not here." I found out later, much later, after it was over, that her caravan had been separated in the processing storm 4 days back. Her keeper, an elderly Varath male, had died in the crush at Gate 12. She'd walked herself to the med ward because it was warm and she was cold, and she'd curled into an unclaimed cot and waited for someone to notice her. For 3 days, nobody had. The camp ran on registration. If you weren't in the system, you weren't in the camp. You were what the administrators called a ghost load, an informal, technical term that meant you have no rights here, no ration allocation, no legal standing, and if someone with a collection license finds you, we didn't see it. The first retriever came that night. I was still at the terminal, working, when he pushed through the ward flap. A big Hesari male in a contractor's vest with a licensing badge clipped to the breast, the kind that meant he worked for one of the labor contract houses that circled refugee stops like Orth's shelf. He had a scanner. He moved through the ward slowly, passing the scanner over wristbands, checking the returns, until he got to the far corner and the scanner chimed. He looked up, then he looked at me. "Retriever's license," he said. "Unregistered being, I'm authorized to." "You're authorized to retrieve unregistered beings," I said. "Show me the scan return." He held the scanner out. It showed a body heat signature, no biometric ID, no species match. "Ghost load confirmed," the screen said. "A scan return that shows no ID isn't a retrieval authorization," I said. "Camp Protocol 7, Section 3. You need a matched biometric to file a collection claim. You don't have one. If you don't have one, you're not collecting anything from my ward tonight." He stared at me. I'm not tall. I'm not young. I was holding a chart and a stylus, and I was wearing a medic's coat with a coffee stain on the sleeve. He outweighed me by roughly double. "Come back with a match," I said, "or don't come back." He came back at dawn with a supervisor. The supervisor had a printed form. The form said that under Camp Ordinance 41, any unregistered occupant of camp facilities could be remanded to a licensed contractor for processing pending species verification. I read the form twice, carefully. "This ordinance applies to unregistered occupants of general facilities," I said. "Medical facilities are governed under the Transit Humanitarian Accord, Article 9. A patient under active medical supervision cannot be remanded without a treating physician's written discharge. I haven't discharged her." The supervisor looked at me over the form. "She isn't a logged patient." "She is now," I said. I logged her at 0200, medical intake, malnutrition, exposure, and acute stress response. My authority, my ward. It wasn't a lie. I had logged her at 0200. I'd spent the 2 hours between the retriever's departure and sunrise making it true, filling in every field the system would accept without a species ID, flagging the file for humanitarian review, attaching my own medical license number as the responsible clinician. The system was full of forms. I had learned in 11 years of working transit camps that forms cut both ways. They left. They came back that afternoon with a camp administrator named Torval, who had the flat expression of a man who had handled 1,000 situations like this and found all of them tiresome. "Dr. Vassell," he said, "the child has no verified species registration, no family claim on record, and no legal status in this camp. Whatever intake note you filed is provisional at best." "Then let's make it permanent," I said. I put a form on the table in front of him. Under Transit Humanitarian Accord Article 14, a treating physician may register an unaccompanied minor as a medical dependent for the duration of care. I've completed the form. I need your countersignature. He looked at the form, he looked at me. This is for human dependents. Article 14 doesn't specify species. It was a small gap in the language. The people who'd written Article 14 had been thinking about human children traveling with human medics. They hadn't thought to write human into the clause because it hadn't occurred to them they needed to. I had read the accord the way you read a thing when you needed to say something slowly, looking for what it didn't exclude. Torval countersigned. I don't think he entirely meant to. I think the form was simply in front of him, and I was simply standing there, and he had 17 other problems that morning, and this was the path of least resistance. Whatever his reason, he signed. I walked back to Ward 7. The child was sitting up in her cot, watching the door the way she had watched everything, with that careful, patient, honey-colored attention, like she was trying to determine exactly how much hope was safe to spend. I sat down. "You have a name now," I said, "officially, on paper." I showed her the filed form on my tablet. "It says your name is Myra Vassell. That's my name too. That means no one can take you out of this ward without taking me first, and they'd have a lot of trouble doing that." She looked at the screen for a long time. Then she looked at me. "Myra," she said, very quietly, trying the shape of it. "If you want another name later, you can have one," I said. "This one is just for now, just so you exist." The retrievers didn't come back. Whatever the labor contract house had been hopping for, a registered medical dependent with a physician's name attached and a humanitarian accord flag on the file was more paper than it was worth. They moved on to easier targets, and I tried not to think too hard about what that meant. 8 days later, a family filed a species claim. Verath cluster, 2 adults and an older child, all properly registered in the camp, who had seen the humanitarian flag on the board and recognized the species description. Her mother's sister. She'd been searching since the gate crush, working through every ward in the camp, and she'd finally found the right flag on the right board. I stood in the ward doorway and watched the reunion from a distance, the way you do when something good is happening and you don't want to be in the middle of it. The aunt dropped to her knees, and the child, Myra, walked into her arms like she was walking into something she had decided, carefully and at great personal cost, to trust. Before they left, Myra came back across the ward to me. She held out her wristband, the camp-issue one I'd printed for her with her registered name on it. "Can I keep this?" she asked. "It's yours," I said. She curled her fingers around it, pressed it to her chest, and walked back to her family. I went back to my rounds. 44 patients now, all properly logged. I finished my chart, drank cold coffee, and sat for a moment in the quiet of a ward that smelled of antiseptic and too many bodies. She'd been invisible for 3 days. It had taken me 1 night and a form to make her real. That's the whole story. That's all it ever takes, and somehow nobody ever thinks to do it.